here. I appreciate you, and I hope you find some great uh, treasures in this webinar tonight. So, with my journey, I can tell you that I am really never impressed by titles or power of position when I meet people or hear about them. If I do meet someone who seems really together and popular, I am not impressed either. I want to see who they really are. What is their story, is really what I'm thinking. How did they get to where they are? Has it always been about money and recognition or something deeper? And what has made them who they are? I do know that one of my top 5 strengths is context, which means you look back to find answers to understand the present. Context helps me make decisions. Much more recently in my life, I regularly get to meet, collaborate, and work with some of the most amazing people. Yes, I did say amazing, but wait, I will get back to that shortly. I want to go backwards and let's start at the beginning for me. The beginning of my story and how I was molded by my circumstances. And then so you can see where I'm coming from and maybe help you remind you of your vulnerabilities, maybe to offer yourself some grace. So, for many years, I was an only child. I was the product of a divorced household, and only my 17-year-old mother was present after just a few months of my life. And since my biological father was very abusive, my mom didn't really know how to love me affectionately, which resulted in verbal and emotional abuse in my house. So I have known well abandonment and loneliness all my life. When I was in 5th grade, life began to change in many ways, and I gained a stepdad and a brother and a sister on the weekends. But the worst was when an older boy began touching me inappropriately and doing things to me that I did not understand. So, also, I have known sexual abuse too early. And I told no one until adulthood, and it took me years to work through this damage that had all been started in me. All of that was my normal. And then as I got older, the shame that I would feel because of choices that I would make, the things that I allowed. I carried and have known the weight of shame far too long. We all have tragedies, right? Traumas, trials that we experience through life. And maybe you can even relate to some of my story. We all have different normals, and these normals are not necessarily good or healthy for us. As we live out our life, especially as we get older, we have choices to process and heal or ignore and just survive. And by the way, not doing anything or ignoring is also a choice. Common statements are made about how we just need to forget about it and move on, right? Or just get over it. But this is skipping the opportunity to find wholeness and the treasure in those trials and really allowing the trial to cause more damage. I have suffered so much pain, yet I have met so many that have suffered way more than me. This doesn't lessen my pain, but it does encourage me that I can get through anything. It's probably why I also started the Life Empowered podcast, where I invite you into others' stories of struggle, defeat, and loss, and how they have come through to where they are today. Did you catch that bio of mine? If not, I founded and run a nonprofit whose mission is about loving, restoring, and supporting women recovering from sex trafficking and exploitation. Yes, for some of you, a fog may just have gone over your head. I get it. You hear of this crime, but you have no understanding of how this is happening to people in your own backyard. It may seem huge and even overwhelming to process, but I want to submit something to you that pain is pain. The loneliness, shame, rejection, loss, abuse, our pains are all things that we can relate to in some level. But also, Restoration is restoration, no matter the details. You see, my vulnerabilities made me ripe for the picking, for more abuse and traumas, and even for being manipulated into sex trafficking. But thankfully, that did not happen to me. Those who have been trafficked, it all started with their vulnerability, like mine, like yours. Vulnerabilities like age, dreams, abuse, financial struggle. It goes on, right? And in trafficking, some manipulating them into doing unthinkable things. We all can be vulnerable at different times of our lives. It's not just when we're young, right? We can experience a lot of pain and suffering as we grow. The people that we let close to us, like family, romantic relationships, friendships. Since starting Redeem and Restore Center, I get to meet and collaborate and work with some of the most amazing people. I am most impressed by survivors of sex trafficking that have walked the hard journey of restoration, because they are people that have been broken in so many ways, often beyond even our own understanding, but they are still human. And under all that baggage and facade that they may show, they needed to be seen, valued, and supported to find real restoration. Let me say that again. They needed to be seen, valued, and supported to find real restoration. I'm so impressed by what they have already survived. And now that they courageously choose to look back and process through lies, the unfairness, the evil, the overwhelming pains, unresolved issues, grief, losses. Why would they put themselves through that? But it's so they could find the truth, to see that they are worth so much more, to find hope, to find peace, to even dream, to see that they could have been created to be uniquely beautiful, to know joy, to really be fully alive, to be fully human, and begin to believe and understand that they were created to be beautiful and have real purpose, just like you and I desire. Life isn't about, right, just getting a job, paying your bills, and getting through the day. That's just settling for another way of survival. I am more than impressed, really. I'm inspired personally that I can get through anything. I mean, if they can do more than just survive the hell that they've gone through, how can I have any excuses to not fight through? How can you? You can decide to choose to grow, to choose to change, so that you can find joy again and live wholehearted. I am inspired to continue the work that I get to do, because I can be a part of seeing more amazing women walk through their journey to joy. There are so many opportunities for you to learn from your past, your pains, your circumstances, your losses. I am the first to complain about the process. And whine about the process. But to really live life is a continual process. You can choose to be intentional, not just on the defense and surviving all that's thrown at you. Our culture often has trained us to find the quick fix, settle for easy, or take a pill. But to really come through the struggle or situation, it takes your investment in time with your mind, emotions, and your spirit. They are interconnected and must be processed together. You can decide to choose to recognize unhealthy issues or triggers. You can choose to be brave and courageous and even face them with truth and grace for yourself. You are worth the time. You are worth the investment. You are worthy of joy. You can live wholehearted. You can have more joy along your journey. I have read many books. I've attended support groups. I've attended trainings. I've learned from others who've walked similar journeys. I found security in learning and knowing my Creator loves me and has shown himself faithful to me when all others have failed. I will continue to learn and grow in my journey through life, fighting to live wholeheartedly and have joy, to always look, to learn, to find the treasure in each trial. So you may wonder, what are some of the treasures that are from my pain and my suffering from growing up? Well, I have found that I am very independent and I work hard. I persevere through struggle and do not give up without a fight. I've experienced God's faithfulness to never leave me or forsake me. I fight to show others of their value. I lead an organization that is about being consistent in showing love and support to the most rejected and lonely people around. And I am thankful for each one of those things. To give you a little idea of the list of tools that I highly recommend, one, when you are really suffering and maybe not even have words to express, reading the Psalms in the Bible, they're called laments. You can read them and you can relate to those prayers. To Be Told is by Dan Allender, and it's really about learning the importance of your story and how that you look at your story and how you can grow in your journey. Boundaries is another book that all of us can learn from and practice regularly for healthy relationships. Maybe even a counselor, a life coach, or a specialist. Small groups for support, friendship, and growing. Do you remember what I said? How the survivors, they need support. They need people around you. You can't do this yourself. You need to find the right people around you. Journal your thoughts. Sometimes just getting them out of your head, they become smaller, less scary once you write them down. One last word before our reflective question. Please don't settle to just survive. I want you to believe today that you are worth the investment. I don't want you to miss living a full life wholeheartedly and to experience joy or more joy. Right now, I'm going to play some instrumental music and give you about a minute to think about this question. The reflection question is there a place in your life where you have settled to survive and missed the treasure from processing through the pain? Obviously, you can take more time to think about that later if you'd like. But did anyone want to have anything to share or want to answer that question? You're free to engage now, unmute. I won't wait too long but please let us know. Well, I'm going to assume you don't, but if you do have questions or want to share, we'll definitely have time at the end. I know some of these are very personal and maybe even a little heavy, so maybe you won't, and that's fine as well. So I am going to introduce Jody to you. She is the next presenter. Jody is the founder and owner of Piece by Piece Grief Recovery. She is a grief recovery method specialist certified through the Grief Recovery Institute, so she can help others see the beauty in themselves by being a connector of hope and a heart with ears. So thank you, Jody. I turn it over to you.
Krista, thank you so much. And I don't know about everybody else, but I was hanging on to every single word of your story, and it was absolutely beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. You know, each and every one of us has a unique story, like Krista, like Dina, like myself, about where we came from and where we are now and how we got here. But there is one thing in life that is universal to all of us, and unfortunately, that is that we will experience grief and loss in our lifetime. You know, pain and peace just come in our world, and it's something that we have to learn to accept, but it's hard to do. And how we move forward from the pain of grief and loss and negative experiences in our life has a lot to do with relationships. It has a lot to do with our relationship with ourself, with other people, with God. And so before I share with you some of the trials that I've been through and some of the treasures that I've discovered in my lifetime, I want to do a quick little mind exercise with all of you. And I want you to just take about 15 seconds. And I want you to pretend that you're a child again, maybe 10 years old, and you're standing outside the window of the house that you grew up in, and you're looking in. And I want you to just put in your mind, what are the first few thoughts that come to your mind? Memories, good ones, bad ones, relationships, sounds. So just take a few seconds and just picture yourself looking in that window. You know, when I do this exercise in some of my workshops, most of the time people will think of a negative memory, and that's just because our memories store negative things easier because it takes our mind longer to process, so they're in there longer. And so for me, I'm just going to share a little bit about my childhood. So when I look into my window, the first few things that I see are my mom. She's got an apron on, she's making a lot of dinners. She's got a smile on her face. She was beautiful. She was lugging 5 kids to church, all 2 years apart, every Sunday. She had a great sense of humor. And she was like my Jesus on earth. She truly was. She lived what she believed. And I see my dad. I see this kind of a solemn man, but he was handsome and brilliant with his briefcase, going to work Monday through Thursday, kind of just stressed a lot, but providing for his family. And, you know, when I think about my childhood in general, it was good. I had a great roof over my head. I had friends. I made decent grades, and I had 2 parents who I know loved me. But there was also a dark thread in my tapestry of my life. And I would say that was on Friday nights. I dreaded Friday nights. And the reason I dreaded Friday nights was because they were filled with anxiety for me. They triggered a lot of worry and fear. And that's because Monday through Friday, you know, my dad was home. He'd be on the couch every night watching Flintstones to kind of decompress, and I Love Lucy. But on Friday night, that was his night to get out and drink. And he could become very explosive. So my relationship with my dad as a kid was very conflicted. I loved him so much. I knew that he loved me, but I hated the drinking because it changed who I was as a child and it affected me into adulthood throughout my life. So I didn't know then that I was experiencing grief, but when I went to the Grief Recovery Institute years ago, I went because I thought I would be helping other people. I thought, I've gotten through my life through a lot of tragedy and a lot of loss in my life. And I thought I came out pretty well. I did pretty good, raised a couple of kids that I'm so proud of, had a wonderful husband, a 30-year marriage. And yet I didn't know that I was experiencing the grief that I did because I stuffed so much down that went into my adulthood. And so to this day, there's things like loud voices. My dad had a very loud, piercing voice. And he also had a beautiful voice when he sang. But to this day, I will jump if just, somebody walks into a room with kind of a deep voice, if a man walks in. I sucked my thumb, I think, until I was 12 years old. So there were things that affected me, obviously. But in speaking about grief and relationships, I want to talk about some of the intangibles that go along with understanding what true grief and loss is. And Krista hit on a lot of these intangibles as she was speaking, because most of us think about grief and loss in association with death or bereavement. But think about some of the intangibles that happen to so many of us in our lifetime, like the loss of trust or the loss of safety, the loss of approval or identity. If you've gone through a divorce and you lost your spouse and you're kind of sitting there saying, who am I now without this person? Human trafficking, right? The loss of control of one's body. I can't even imagine. I cannot even imagine going through that. So my training in grief recovery opened my eyes 360 degrees and completely changed my attitude and my beliefs and my behaviors about coping with grief and loss. And to this day, I am so happy that that's what I get to do at Piece by Piece, sharing the grief recovery method because it changed my life. And now I recognize grief for so much more than I used to. One of the quick problems that I want to point out, though, with dealing with grief is that society kind of teaches us to be intellectual about our grief. And that's one of the greatest challenges in feeling our heart and dealing with unresolved grief, is that we try to deal with pain and loss intellectually. So, for example, I don't know how many of you might have had a pet when you were young and maybe the pet died and mom or dad said, well, don't worry about it. We'll get a new dog on Saturday. Or you've gone through a divorce and friends with good meaning intentions say, oh, you'll find somebody else, he wasn't good enough for you. So a griever doesn't want to hear, right, that kind of advice, that intellectual advice. It may be accurate, like, yes, you might find somebody else in your life, or yes, you could get another pet on Saturday. But the problem is it's so emotionally barren that when a griever is going through that, grievers don't want to be fixed by other people. They just need to be heard. They need to be seen. And so back to my relationship with my dad, because this is really about relationships. God put us on this earth not to be alone, but to have relationships with other people. And so if we are so filled with stuffing down pain and not knowing how to deal with loss becomes negatively cumulative, right, over our lifetime. And so we don't learn how to deal with it appropriately. And so I think of that, my dad, why did he drink? Why was he in so much pain? Because people do things like drinking and drugs and eating and over-exercising because they're trying to avoid something. So I didn't know until I was in my 40s that my dad saw his father get killed on a bicycle. And that was the day of his birthday. And shortly after that, his mom was put into a state facility. She underwent a lobotomy, if you can even imagine that term being used today. So he went into foster care, lived in a YMCA. But you know what else he did? At 50 years old, he got his master's degree. He had dropped out of high school, but at 50 years old, he got his master's degree and became the vice president of a big corporation. So when I think about what my dad did to deal and cope with his pain, it's amazing how much it reflected in how I coped with my pain as an adult. I admired him and loved him so much when he opened up and shared with me what he had gone through as a child. And I so wish he had done that when I was younger, because I was too angry with him when I was younger. I didn't understand then, and I expected him to be that father that I needed, that connection. And he was in there somewhere, but I finally found out where that was, years later as an adult. And so I could feel the trust and the connection with him later on. And I was so ashamed of the judgment and the anger that I had with him all those years. But I learned how to forgive myself for that, because it takes all of us to open up and open up our hearts. And I'll say this over and over again, that grievers don't need to be fixed. They need to be heard. So I've had a lot of cumulative losses in my life. I lost my 30-year-old brother, Jimmy, on St. Patrick's Day in 1990. He fell down a flight of stairs the year before, and he had been drinking. And he was in a coma for 11 days. And I decided that I'm going to go home and I'm going to take care of Jimmy so that mom and dad could go on a trip. And they had nothing to worry about. Well, a long story short, my brother died that night while my parents were landing in Florida, and I was with him by myself. And you can imagine the anxiety and the guilt of what could I have done different. And I had to call my parents on the phone and say that I'm at the hospital and Jimmy just died. I lost both parents a year apart. I have moved 14 times in my life, early in my career, for my jobs as well as my husband's jobs. And probably one of the most devastating things that happened to me in my trials was my soulmate announced to me about 4 years ago that he loved me, but he wasn't in love with me anymore. And that statement is ingrained in my mind forever. But what I know for sure, and why I went to the Grief Recovery Institute initially to kind of deal with the pain of my brother, I learned so much about how to help myself, and I learned about who I was. And I learned that there's a price you pay for loving people in life. And there's a price that you pay for having these amazing relationships. So if we never loved, we wouldn't have a reason to grieve, right? So today I can honestly say that I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the gifts of both pain and peace in my life. The good news is I'm still standing. So I think I'm going to explain some of the things that have helped me, these treasures that I found in my trials, in the hopes that maybe you'll find hope in some of your trials. Whenever I have struggles, I remind myself, it's just not about what I'm living for in the moment. It's about who I'm living for. I'm living for the day, not just today. I'm living for Jesus. The Grief Recovery Institute taught me how to say goodbye to the pain of loss and re-engage in life. It taught me how to be a processing plant with my emotions instead of a storage tank and stuffing everything down. I've learned that forgiveness is something every one of us has to practice in all of our relationships because we're all imperfect. I've learned that if we are truly honest with ourselves and take accountability for our part in every relationship, we'll find that we all have apologies that need to be made. Grieving people don't lack courage. They're not weak. They just lack the tools and a safe environment to let their hearts really speak. So relationships are truly vital to our emotional well-being. And again, we grieve because we've loved. Most importantly, I try to just live every single day in the present. I don't beat myself up anymore about the would-haves and the could-haves and the should-haves and what I wish had been different. And I don't worry about the future because God takes care of that, right? We have enough to worry about every day, so I'm not going to worry about tomorrow. My faith, I can honestly say, has been the greatest gift I've ever known. My children are the greatest gift I was ever given in life. And when it comes to the grief recovery method that I teach in my workshops and why I opened up piece by piece grief recovery, it's because It's a gift I gave myself. It's the greatest gift I ever gave myself. And now I'm privileged to give it to other people. So I can honestly go to sleep every night and just say, thank you, Lord, for today. You know, I did my very best to glorify you, and my heart is at peace instead of in pieces. So those are some of the treasures that I've learned in my trials. And I don't know, Krista, if you wanted to share the question that I have for everybody.
Yeah.
But I hope that everybody listens to this question, because I'm certain that it applies to every single one of us.
Thank you so much, Jody. That was excellent. So much good meat in there. Jody's questions for reflection. Is there a relationship in your life, past or present, that still negatively affects you or limits you emotionally? And I put it in the chat. And then she has a follow-up. If so, are you willing to try something very different that requires 16 hours of your time and will provide you with tools with any relationship you have past, present, or future? So I'll give you a minute to think on that for a bit. All right, not to take up any time there. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay. So we will come back again towards these questions or anything else you want to discuss at the end. But thank you so much, Jody. Hopefully you're not too overwhelmed yet. Hopefully you're getting some nuggets from each of these, because you're going to get some more, because now I'm going to introduce Dina Zebel to you. Dina is a certified life and soul care coach who walks alongside those who are stuck in cul-de-sac mode, circling around the same struggles and ruts, but are thirsty for more. The aim is to untangle the knots, decrease internal clutter, stir passion, set intentions, and pursue lasting life change. Thank you, Dina.
Thanks, Krista. And already it's been great. I've learned some good things from both of you. So thanks for sharing. So I want to start us off. I would like to talk a little bit about a diamond. You know, diamond is a girl's best friend, right? So when we look at a diamond, we see it as a beautiful, valuable thing. But honestly, diamonds start out as coal or carbon, and they're really something very unattractive and unassuming and really undesirable. But when that piece of carbon or coal goes through the crucible of heat and pressure, which can happen through like a surface eruption or even a meteorite having a high-speed collision with the earth, it unlodges the possibility for that diamond. And that process, if you could imagine, like eruption or high-speed collision, is intense and it's difficult. And then you have the diamond cutting process, which is this painstaking process. Every cut has to be just right. And just takes so much effort so that it is flawless. And while any carbon or coal, the beginnings of that diamond have no obvious value, its value is hidden and it's hard to find. Yet every piece of carbon and coal holds the possibility for hidden potential. And if that potential is unearthed, it is of great worth and worth the effort and the difficulty that it went through to get there. And so in the end, that diamond becomes something of great value. It's irreplaceable often to people and so very desirable. But that's not the way that it started out. And so the same is for us. The pressure of hardship can really cause hidden treasure within us or our circumstances to emerge. And it's often emerging from a crushing experience that creates resiliency, a deeper wisdom. And in fact, you might just become the strongest and brightest that you've ever been, though you won't see that perhaps at the beginning or in the middle of that particular trial. The more a diamond is tried and cut and polished, the more light that it reflects and the more beautiful it becomes, the more valuable it is. So I just want to really come to you today and encourage you that under pressure, amazing things can happen. And I want to share with you a little bit of my story as well. Children are really clay to be molded. And the nature of children, one is life is caught, not taught. And children are really, they just want to love and they just want to trust. And often, many people I know have gone through childhood situations in their home where that love and that trust was broken. And what children do with that, they often take the blame because they don't have the maturity to process through to say, hey, this isn't about me, this is about my dad or this other person. And so they often take the blame and begin their life of shame, which says, this is something about me, something's wrong with me. And if something wasn't wrong with me, this scenario wouldn't be happening, or dad wouldn't be yelling at you or yelling at me, or dad wouldn't be yelling at mom, whatever that is. And so children have a tendency to internalize a lot. Now, for me, in my home, my dad was actually in and out of jail my whole life. There was just a lot of chaos because of that. And hey, Jody, I've got you beat. I've moved over 50 times in my life. And just the chaos of that alone, right, is enough to be traumatic. There's an exercise I do with my coaching clients often where I have them separate their lives into categories and then define or label those different categories. And my young childhood with my dad, like I said, in and out of jail, there was a lot of yelling, a lot of just dissension in our home generally. You never really knew what to expect. It could be great and people could be yelling and throwing things. But that time of my life, I labeled as, I'm going to try to do this, the serpent bites, because I really feel like that's the time in my life where the enemy sort of got his fangs into me and sort of put a poison into me. And that really directed a lot of my life for many, many years. There was also, I had 2 perpetrators of sexual abuse. And all I really want to say about that here is that what I learned from that was that sex was love. And that was how you got your needs met. It is what made you valuable. It's where your power was, and it's what people noticed you for. And because of all of the neglect and moving around and the chaos, I was really just hungry for love in my life. And I needed constant validation. So that, coupled with what I learned through the sexual abuse, really set me on a course. And in my teen and young adult life, I really lived from some very broken pieces. And then I met my now husband. Our relationship was rocky from the very beginning. It was on again, off again. He was breaking up with me. I was breaking up with him. And somehow we ended up getting married at some point. That's a longer story than what we have time for. But about a year after we actually got married, really my husband started to check out. And he abandoned the relationship. And I like to say he left the building. And he made it very clear to me that he was going to support our child and the home, but he had no interest in any kind of relationship with me. And coming from where I came from, somebody who needed validation and needed that affection and love, it was failure in my face, and it was just a really excruciating time. Now, to be fair to my husband, I mean, coming from where I came from, I came with a lot of stuff. I came with a lot of baggage, and my part really, um, I could say, was just the insecurity that I brought with me and just the control. Anytime you've been through trauma, there are going to be some control issues. And what I learned is control is really all about fear. And as I look back on that time in my life, what I realized is what I was really afraid of was more hurt and disappointment, more shattered dreams, and more failure, and more just being left out, left alone, left unloved. And through that ache that was in me, I was really sabotaging the very things that I really wanted, which was a good family life and a happy home and to be loved. And so I tried everything with my husband. I tried logic. I tried to be the perfect wife. I tried everything, and nothing really seemed to penetrate or make anything better. You know, we continued to be divided and we continued to argue. And so I had to make a decision. Okay, I am either going to divorce or I am going to stay. But if I stay, I have to do this different. I cannot continue on the way that I have been. And I really prayed about that, and I decided to stay. And what I see for that time was what I was really deciding is this. I was deciding to succumb to the heat and the pressure of the circumstance. I decided that I was going to live my best regardless. I was going to release my husband. I was going to become the best person that I could be, and I was going to focus on that. And it was really a season of heat and pressure and intensity and loneliness and uncertainty. And again, I would just use the word excruciating. But there were diamonds of freedom that I'm not sure that I would trade. So I got freed from just really my need for validation, from self-esteem issues that were rooted in how others responded to me, and then also about my internal belief system about who I was. I was seeing many things in my life through the lens of my trauma. And so I began a wellness journey for my heart and for my mind. And it started with this, with being honest about where I was broken, and then being open to God doing a deep work by reshaping my identity, tearing away lies and dysfunctional patterns that were really a driving force in my life. And I began to learn why I did the things that I did. I began a lot of self-reflection and just really looking deeply at my behaviors, and how I sabotaged and how I manipulated life in order to fill my emptiness and pain. And during this season, God gave me just wonderful friends who were on their own wellness journey, who they could model for me. I learned so much. And they loved me unconditionally. They listened to me and were even brave enough to share truth with me. And then there was God, who was just my safe place to run. And I did that often. And he just has not disappointed me. And so through that time, as painful and difficult as it was really like the cutting of that diamond, right? And I'm not sure that I would change any of it, because what I've learned is that amazing things can happen under heat and pressure. My husband and I now, we're in a new season. We are probably better friends than we ever were. There is still healing and things that need to happen in our relationship, but it is on a way different plane than those really difficult times. And we've had growth. And one thing I like to talk about in the context of relationship is this thing I call the dance. So when we're in relationship with anyone, we learn to move in relational patterns and ebb and flow sort of with each other. And sometimes our dysfunctional behaviors can get into that, and we sort of get into some grooves with people. And if you want change in a relationship, somebody has to start changing the dance. Somebody has to change the pattern. And in order for that relational dance to change. And I can tell you that that was the decision I made way back when, was to stay, but to take the focus off of fixing my husband and making him do what I wanted him to do, and focus on who I was and how I was behaving and living life in my home. And I began to change the dance. And it took some years, right, for other things to shift, but other things did shift. And so how do we glean treasure from trials, right? First, I want to share with you a quote that I love, and it's this: pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. It's what happens when we try to avoid the pain. And Jody spoke about this. We have a choice. It's like this: if suffering is a river, we can get in the river and swim in it, or we can use it to float our boat downstream and move forward. And so really it's about our response, right? And how we can get our response into a place that it becomes a gift and an opportunity for us. So I want to share some tips with you. One of the things I love to talk about is a growth mindset. So a growth mindset versus a perfection or completion mindset. So if we have a perfection mindset or a completion mindset, we will always be set up for failure, because we will never get to perfection. And lots of times we don't get to completion. And so we're constantly setting ourselves up for that failure. But if we have a growth mindset, we can grow a little bit, and we can celebrate that. And in celebrating that, we create some momentum, and some greater ownership over what we're doing. And we can be more excited, as opposed to holding up this high standard for ourselves that we just never can quite get to. And we're always disappointed in ourselves or others. We can take that and apply it to others as well. And so I want to, if you would think about a circle, and inside that circle, we're going to call that our comfort zone. So that is where we are orientated. Community kind of feels safe and easy. Our faith and our hope are firmly rooted. And then there's another circle outside of that circle, and we call that the stretch zone, right? So we have a little less orientation. Maybe our faith and hope is being challenged a little bit, and maybe there's a little bit of extra edge on relationship, but it's really the place of greatest growth, right? Because when we stay just in our comfort zone and we protect to stay there, we don't grow, right? There's nothing there to press us or stretch us. Now, outside of that stretch zone is another zone, and we call that the panic zone, where we're completely disorientated. Our faith and hope are just being rocked. But we have a greater awareness of our limitations. And often too, this is a place where people are pursuing, more spiritual intervention, or are open to God. So even in that panic zone, there can be growth. And I love that visual, because it's helpful to say, where am I in this situation? Am I being stretched? Is this my comfort zone? Or if I'm feeling complacent, I may say, hey, I need to find a way to use this to challenge myself and stretch myself. Krista had already mentioned lament, which is another great tool. And I'd like to just say this about it. What is the truest thing that you can say to God about the situation that you're facing? What is the truest thing? God is big enough. His shoulders are big enough to hear it and to handle it. But there is something so beautiful about taking all of that you're carrying and putting it down on paper between you and God. And as Krista mentioned, the Psalms are full of laments. And so another tip would be to stop the sabotage. And this is something I'm just learning a lot about in my own life. So a strength overused can become a way that we sabotage ourselves, and really pushing away the very things that we actually want. And I like to refer to the ways that we sabotage sort of as a nasty cast of characters. Okay, so I'm going to read a list of 10 sabotage characters, and just see if any of these uh, stand out to you or ring true for you. So there's the judge, there's the avoider, the pleaser, the hypervigilant, the hyper rational, the restless, the victim, the controller, the stickler, the hyperachiever. So in order to do, and you cannot fight an enemy that you cannot see. So in order to improve or grow in an area, you have to be able to name it and be aware of it, and name, you know, in this case, how and where you sabotage. I have a little tagline that I say is, if you want to tame it, you've got to name it. And if you want to know more about this, a little bit later, I will be talking about a class that I'm offering that really zeroes in on these ways that we sabotage. And finally, the last thing I want to share with you is that there is a gift and opportunity in every circumstance or outcome. And I'm not trying to kid you that that's always an easy place to get to, right? It's often extremely challenging, but it's there, and it's a mindset, right? I will let this thing overtake me, or I will grow from it. And that's what I really want to challenge you to today. Your circumstance is really a diamond in the rough, and it's waiting for the potential in its unearthing. And I think what I hope that you've heard today in the 3 stories that we've shared is that there is treasure in trial, if you just take some time and some effort to look for it. And I just hope that there's a nugget in here that would be helpful for you today.
Thank you so much, Dina. That was wonderful. So many great nuggets in there to practice, right? Dina has 2 reflection questions as well. So I put them in the chat, but they are: name at least one way you most often sabotage and work against yourself. Another one is, in your current challenge you are facing, what is one gift or opportunity that might come from what you are experiencing? And can you name more? Okay. Let's see here. Get my volume right. Well, those are 3 chunks of nuggets for you tonight. I hope you have found some good info. Anyone brave enough, courageous enough to have any questions? I don't see any in the chat, but you still can. While you're thinking about that, if you're going to be bold enough to do that, what I noticed through all 3 of our presentations in the flow is I constantly hear the word about choices. Choices can lead to opportunities, right? Are you going to be courageous enough to make those hard choices for those good opportunities for your future? All right, so anyone? I hate silence.
Looks like we got a question from Dan, or just a comment.
Yep, just a comment, but Okay. Well, good thing it's recorded. We'll have to tell them that. Um, all right. Well, I do want to say another huge, huge thanks to MKE Video, Michael and John. Thank you so much for producing and just helping guide us, obviously, for this. We thank you so much for that. Then I want to throw it to Jody for a moment again. Jody, why don't you describe what you're going to give away free?
We're going to have you unmute. There you are.
Here I go. Yeah, so I would love to offer a lucky winner. This, I don't know if you can see it, but it's basically a scholarship to a grief recovery workshop. It has a value of $325. I do the grief share workshops basically year round. So we'll just need to communicate with the winner and find out exactly which workshop you would like to attend. And if that doesn't work for you, we can certainly do a one-on-one as well. So that is my gift to you for the lucky winner. And I believe, Krista, you also have the flyers.
Yes, and so the flyer of these opportunities that you can pay for as well will be included in the email that you will get. So how about you, Dina? Are you ready to tell us about what your free offer is?
There, I think I'm unmuted, am I?
Yep.
All right, great.
Go
Yeah,
for it.
actually what I'd like to offer tonight, it's a 6-week mental fitness program, and it just is a way of really increasing your capacity to deal with life's challenges in a positive way as opposed to a negative way. And we'll talk about the saboteurs as part of that and just some other tools. So I'm giving away one of those seats too, and there's a little bit of group component to that. As well as some video work and some other exercises. So
Super. Thank you so much, Dina.
Yeah.
And remember, if you don't win, the details of both of these opportunities will be sent to you to sign up at your cost if you're interested in the email. The email that I have prepared to send you is quite long because there's a lot of great stuff in there for you. So please just peruse it when you have a few minutes. All right, Michael is going to spin the wheel for us, I believe, to find the winners.
All right, we're going to go ahead and spin this. We don't know who exactly is in the audience tonight. We will do our best to make sure that we accommodate. So if it lands on somebody who's not here, and they do not claim it, we will just go on to the next one.
Sounds good.
All right, so what's the first item?
So Jody's free gift, we'll spin for that one first.
All right.
Oh, Terry, and I believe she is here. So
Yeah, congratulations, Terry.
Ooh.
Hey, Terry.
yay!
So we'll send that directly to you as well. And now we'll spin for Dina's free gift and see who gets to win that.
All right. It looks like Dan.
Dan is the winner for that one. Woohoo! Awesome. Smiling confetti. Hello. Well, thank you so much for that help, Michael. I thank you, each of you, for attending tonight. And please follow up with any questions. I'll give you one last chance if you want to throw out any questions right now. Otherwise, you'll have to wait and respond later. Any questions for any of us?
Can I just ask one quick question of Jody?
Yes, please.
Please,
Okay.
can you hear me?
So, hi, yes, I can hear you.
Hi.
So you talked about being more of a processing plant versus a storage facility. And I'm sure that 16 hours, that's really what the answer is. But can you give us just a couple of tips in that processing?
Absolutely. Basically what we're going to be, what is your first name?
I'm Stacy.
Stacy. Basically, Stacy, we go through kind of an 8-week program for the workshop. And we do a lot of educational information on the myths of grief. And then what we get into in the meat of the program in weeks 3, 4, 5 is we start kind of unpeeling the onion, which makes every person in the workshop utilize the tools specifically to their losses in their lives. So you're going to unpeel the onion and you're going to look at all the losses in your lifetime. And then we're going to focus on one relationship within all those losses to work on, the one that you feel you need to get the most complete with, that you still have a lot of unresolved grief with. And when you go through each week, there's assignments, we read and we share, we do partner work. But basically what you're doing throughout that time in the workshop is a great question, because we stuff down everything. This is an action-based program. It's not just like a talk support group. It's action-based, where we actually have to go through assignments, and you are going to go through your life. You're going to unpeel that onion. We're going to pick a particular relationship, and we're going to look at all the things within that relationship, positive and negative. So that's kind of the unpeeling the onion and the processing, instead of just maybe going to a class and watching a video or talking about it. This is evidence-based and it's action-based. And I always say to people, Stacy, 16 hours of your life to do homework. When people are willing to be honest with themselves and put in the work, it's amazing how it can change your life. But I think the best part is that the tools that you learn in this workshop, you can apply to losses from the past. If it's somebody that's already passed in your life, you can apply it to a current relationship. And best of all, you can apply it to future relationships and how to handle grief. So it's changed my life. So thank you for the question. I hope that answered it.
It did. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Very welcome.
Anyone else? That rotten silence again.
Silence is a good thing though, right? It gives us everybody time to process. It's hard to formulate questions on such a personal level.
It is. It is. You're very good, Jody. All right. Well, I think that's it then for tonight. You will be getting your emails momentarily. Winners and all of you, please respond to the feedback questions and reply to any of us with any of the questions you like as well, because all of our contact information will be in that email. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you,
Hi,
everybody.
thanks for coming. Hi, Terry.
Hey, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you again.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and start putting people in the waiting room unless anyone has any wants to stay after with any more questions.
Bye.
Bye, Terry.
Hi,
Good
Terry.
night.
And we are clear.
Nice.
Ooh,
Great work.
7:37.
Krista, you're muted.
Oops.
I noticed. I'm like, oh, I'm talking to myself. I already sent the email follow-up to everyone, and now I have the emails ready to go to the winners. So done.
Oh,
Thank you,
you are-
ladies. You guys were awesome. Thank you, John and Michael, for your help.
Thank you, Krista, for just putting it all together. You were wonderful. Everybody was wonderful. I learned from everybody. And thank you, John and Michael. You guys are the best. Patient.
I liked how
So can anyone join these if I put out the word to my own network?
Yeah, absolutely.
oh yeah. Uh-huh.
So I've got a lot of family who are I don't know, like COVID has hit a lot of people hard, especially like the older folks. My mom lost the ability to drive this past year. She can no longer see, and I think that she's maybe having some, going through her own things right now. And I think this would be really therapeutic for her.
Mhm.
Oh, well, Michael, I included John in the email with the contact info too. So
Okay.
for some reason, there was something like what Jody had or whatever that you wanted to pass on or whatever, that's in there too that you can get from him.
Excellent.
I just forwarded it to you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
and
Mhm.
also, so I know you have the recording, so we'll figure out what we can do with this in the future. But yeah, I hope to make, I don't know, I like the idea of doing